Well, good Monday, folks. Welcome into Strategies for Living here on 101.7 FM and 710 KEEL. And I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan. You, at the other end of the broadcast table, just smiling like a Chessy cat even on Monday.
It's my birthday week.
Yeah, well, you got to turn your microphone on, and you got to go close. It's your birthday
my birthday week.
Oh, wow.
So I'm kind of excited.
Oh, man.
I get to have a birthday all week.
Does that mean, okay, first of all, let me bring on our ace producer. We call him the ace of the airwaves because he keeps us flying high, low, and in between. Ruben Wright.
Good evening.
So it's her birthday week. Does that mean you and I get to sing happy birthday to her?
I think it does.
Yeah, I do too.
Oh,
yeah.
darn.
What day? What day is your birthday?
The 18th. The
Okay.
same as Nelson Mandela.
Well, okay. See, I was going to say that, there's a saying Manic Monday, but this is not a Manic Monday on Strategies for Living. We're having a Mandela Monday.
I like it.
There's a new book out, and we're gonna talk about it this evening. It's actually called The Spiritual Mandela. It's faith and religion in the life of Nelson Mandela, who is one of my heroes. He truly is, and so I'm looking forward to speaking this evening to Dennis Krewagen, and we'll learn all about the spiritual Mandela. That's coming up. He's our life strategist today. Folks, thank you for tuning into Strategies for Living. We are presented today, as we are every day, by CADA, the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse of Northwest Louisiana. They've been helping individuals and families for 60 years now. We're also brought to you by Milestones Counseling Center, by Jerry Anderson State Farm Insurance, by Learning RX, by Highland Place Rehab and Nursing Center, by Jacob's Well Inspirational Books and Gifts, and by Resilient House. We will be right back to learn about the spiritual Mandela, faith and religion in the life of this wonderful man, Nelson Mandela.
I didn't know we shared a birthday.
Here on Strategies. We'll be back. If we're talking addiction prevention, education, and treatment in Shreveport-Bossier for 60 years, we're Welcome back. Welcome back into Strategies for Living, 101.7 FM and 710 KEEL. Welcome back in, PLPC Carla McCormick, marriage and family therapist David McMillan. How did a cattle boy, the youngest son of an illiterate tribal chief, how did a person like this grow up to become one of this world's great political and moral leaders? A lot of authors have attempted to understand the achievements of Mr. Mandela, the first black president of a democratic South Africa, of course, Nobel Peace Prize recipient. A lot of people, we know his extraordinary courage. We certainly know his perseverance. He displayed it while he was imprisoned for all of those years, all of those isolating years in prison. And there is a new book out, and I want you to welcome to the program now noted South African journalist, former parliamentary spokesman for the ANC. He is Dennis Kerwegen. He is a former deputy editor of the Pretoria News. He also served as a political reporter on the Cape Argus. He holds a master's degree from the John F. Kennedy School in Government at Harvard University. He's the recipient of both the Neiman and Mason Fellowships. He's also the author of Brothers in War and Peace, Abraham and Constant Vigian and the Birth of the New South Africa, and his new book, which is published to coincide with Nelson Mandela's 100th birthday. It is The Spiritual Mandela. So we welcome Dennis Kerwegen to Strategies for Living. Mr. Kerwegen, welcome.
Good morning, Dave. David, thank you so much, and let's drop the mister and please use Dennis.
Yeah, absolutely, Dennis. If you'll use David and Carla, well, we'll use Dennis. How about that? Now I've got to tell you,
that's cool.
I got to tell you, you know, I know you are some hours ahead of us, so you're morning, we're evening. So you say good morning, we'll say good evening. How about that?
Indeed, good morning. It's in the middle of the night here, so good morning.
There you go. So what, Dennis? What inspired you to sit down and write? What a wonderful book this is, The Spiritual Mandela. It's out from Imagine. It will be at your favorite bookseller this week, publishing on the 19th. What inspired you to write this book?
David, you know, I most of my life as a reporter, I had spent on reporting about Mandela being in prison. I'd also spent quite a chunk of it on reporting on Mandela as a free person. And as a reporter, one follows someone of the stature of Mandela around. And when he was released, I recall one particular Sunday, I was at the Catholic Church in Cape Town, and Mandela was at that particular service. And the then Archbishop of Cape Town, Bishop Lawrence Henry, was about to serve Holy Communion. And Mandela walked up, and there was a great outcry subsequently among Catholics who were sort of criticizing their Archbishop for giving Holy Communion to a non-Catholic. And the Archbishop's retort was, simply listen, when you're standing there and someone comes up for Holy Communion, you don't ask whether he's a Catholic or not, or whether he's been confirmed or not. You give Holy Communion. And it stuck with me. And later, in his later years, after he had left the presidency, and I learned then that he was receiving Holy Communion at home, and I was wondering, what's going on here? We've written all about Mandela, the great leader, the skillful, wonderful politician, but was there another side that we'd forgotten? Was there another side that we were ignoring? So I set about searching for the story, just in case there was something. And as it turned out, it was this wonderful hidden part of the man where he was passionate about the Christian faith, particularly the Methodist side of the Christian faith. He was raised as a Methodist and requested that he be buried as a Methodist. And that's how the book came about.
And it's extraordinary that a Catholic archbishop, and I say it's extraordinary because, you know, Catholic teaching is, well, you have to be Catholic to receive Holy Communion in the Catholic Church. So I think that speaks to volumes about not only Mr. Mandela, but also that Catholic Archbishop.
He was magnanimous, and from the side where I sit, he acted in a true Christian, Christ-like tradition of not pinning labels onto people, but
Yes.
actually just being a servant of the people. I happen to have known about him because he raised a friend of mine who had been orphaned, but he was one of the many kids that he raised. And he, in his own way, he's a legend as a father figure to many boys and girls, and not a tainted father figure as some Catholic priests have turned out to be, but a real person.
Yes, yes. So this July the 18th, you heard, Carla has just found out this evening that she shares Mr. Mandela's birthday.
What an amazing coincidence.
How about that? I know I'm channeling him as we speak.
Not a bad person to channel at all. Mr. Mandela would be a bit older than you, Carla, though, because this would be his coming up July the 18th. It would be his 100th birthday. The 100th anniversary of his birth is another way to say it. So this idea of faith and religion, your book really focuses on that. Your book gives us, Dennis, a new understanding, if you will, of how religion and faith and spirituality, it is the spiritual Mandela, of course, has this pivotal aspect. It plays a pivotal aspect of his character and achievements and his legacy. I mean, we think of him, as you said, as a great moral leader. We think of him as a great political leader. We generally have not thought of him as a spiritual leader, and yet he is, isn't he?
He is indeed. He is indeed. And if you think about it, David, he was raised in a Xhosa tribe. He was part of the royal family, though not in line to rise to the Xhosa throne. He was just the son of a minor chief. But his father, in his way, was a Xhosa priest, so one could call him a traditional priest.
Right.
But his mother encountered a tribe, an outcast tribe called the Fingers. They were outcast because they associated with the white colonists and took the advantages of what white colonists could give them. And they were Methodists. They introduced via their association with the Methodist Church to Christianity. She became a Christian. Her husband, and I use the word as it was used at the time, allowed her to become a Christian. Right. Remember the type of society in which they lived at the time.
Right.
And these guys saw some potential in this young man. Not a young man, he was a child, but all this boy wanted to do and all that dreamed of ever achieving was to own his own herd of cattle and to become a street fighter, not a street fighter, rather a stick fighter. And that was the ambitions of his life. Didn't know the insides of what was the real school, hardly even wore shoes at that stage of his life. But they told her, this child has potentially has to go to school. For Mandela, that meant he had joined, in a sense, the upper crust of black society, because only those at the top ended up at schools in those days. There was no formal schooling for black children. You could enter the school system, which was run by churches, the Methodist Church in particular, if you were baptized and became a Methodist, which she had to go to her husband to get his permission to do that.
Right.
And then that man, just think about that man, the momentous decision he had to make, the deep thinking.
Now we're talking Mr. Mandela's father, the tribal chief, right?
Father, indeed, yes. Henry. And then he decided, let the child go to school. And some poignant part is he took one of the pairs of trousers that he had worn and he gave it to his kid. to wear to school. And there, the first Mandela male went to school, and he also was baptized, and the whole thing changed. He was introduced to the Methodist side of Christianity, and that is where his spirituality started. His mother, who was known as Fanny, was a devout Methodist, and she also played a big influence on his approach to the Methodist faith and his own spirituality. It's just a remarkable thing that happened there.
We're learning all about this wonderful man coming up on the 100th anniversary of his birth, Nelson Mandela. The book is called The Spiritual Mandela. It's Faith and Religion in the Life of Nelson Mandela. Dennis Querwagen is our life strategist today. We'll come back and talk much more, learn much more about this spiritual side to Nelson Mandela and how it is still impacting and influencing our world today. Be right back.
If you or someone you love is struggling to pay attention, Learning RX wants you to know there is an alternative.
And welcome back. Welcome back into Strategies for Living here on 101.7 FM and 710 KEEL. We are with the author of The Spiritual Mandela, which will be released later this week. Excellent book out from Imagine, and it is The Faith and Religion. It's about faith and religion in the life of Nelson Mandela. And it's interesting, Dennis. Carla and I were talking. I wish you could hear some of our conversation during the commercial break. I know you're listening to the commercials, but Carla, let's share a little bit about that conversation with both Dennis and our listeners, because I think it's intriguing.
Well, hi, Dennis. Thank you for being on the show.
Pleasure, Carla, and happy birthday.
Oh, I thank you. It's a bit early, but I celebrate all week. Thank you. My question to David, and I guess I'll pose the same question to you, is in my mind, and from what I've learned about Mandela, the fact that I guess I just always assumed he was a Christian, because what I knew about him was his, long suffering and his passion, for people, and his passion for the poor, and his, ability to come out of prison and not be bitter and not be angry. And to forgive, and I guess in my mind, I thought, well, those are all Christian values. So, it wasn't a stretch for me to think, oh, he must have been a Christian. And David's saying that that's not necessarily the case. So is that a...
Well, I'm saying that's not the way past biographers, because before Dennis, you certainly, you're one of many biographers of Nelson Mandela.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So but the case being, I guess my question where I'm headed is that a difference because I grew up here in the States, and the way we as Americans look at Nelson Mandela and the way that South Africans look at Nelson Mandela?
Carla, let me answer it this way. There was always the suspicion among some people in South Africa that he was a Christian, but given that at one stage the white government had painted him as public enemy number one, as being a leading communist and atheist. In let's call it in the news media, there was always, he was an enigma in that sense. He hardly spoke about the spiritual side of his life, yet he lived a kind of Christian life. But people were always wondering, and there was always this great debate in South Africa: is he a Christian? Is he an atheist? What the heck is this man? And he didn't make it easier for those who didn't know him. He never spoke about it, but he had a reason for not speaking about it. His reason was basically that the previous government professed to be men and women who believed who were Christians and who were raised as Christians and lived the Christian lives, but their policies were anything but Christian. On Robben Island, once the man who succeeded Mandela as president was Thabo Mbeki. His late father, Governor Mbeki, also served life on Robben Island with Mandela. And one day, Governor Mbeki told the prison guards there, "You start the day by praying, 'Our Father who art in heaven,' and then you say, 'Ask for your daily bread,' but you don't give us our daily bread." And you call yourself Christians. And that was the kind of test that people like Mandela had to endure, people in front of them, their jailers, most of the time being Christians, and not treating them as Christians ought to treat other people. And Mandela had made a decision, a firm decision. He was not going to speak publicly about his spiritual beliefs. And also, according to what I have understand from Methodist bishops in South Africa, and as well as ordinary clergy, that was the essence of being a Methodist. You live, as you said, you live your life as a Christian, so people can see through the deeds and the life that you live that you are indeed a Christian.
Yeah, truly. I remember a hymn, and I'm Catholic. It's the reason I was able to comment on what the extraordinary thing that you talked about at the beginning, Dennis, with the Catholic Archbishop, giving communion to Nelson Mandela. But I remember a hymn as a little boy. They'll know we are Christians by our love. There's a real alignment between the Catholic Church and the Methodist Church, we share the same creed. We share the same lectionary. Some people don't realize that or know that, but the Episcopal Church, the Lutheran Church, the Catholic Church, and the Methodist Church all read out of the same lectionary. I think in the Methodist Church, perhaps that's optional to the minister, to the pastor, but it's available to them. So interesting thing. I've got to share something. I don't want to name the priest because I don't want to embarrass this person, but I could not help but think about gathered around my father's deathbed, and a priest, a local priest, coming in to give communion, and as he was going around, one of the first ones he offered communion to was my father's caregiver, Dorothy, who took wonderful care of my father and mother. And he didn't even question. He just said the body of Christ. And Dorothy said, "Well, I'm not Catholic, Father." And the priest said, "Well, Dorothy, would Jesus want you to go to communion today with Claude?" And Dorothy said, "Well, yes, I guess he would." And he said, "Well, Dorothy, the body of Christ."
Wow.
And it was extraordinary.
Isn't that just so wonderful?
Yeah, it was an I'm sorry to have to share that personal note, but I couldn't help. That's what came to mind, Dennis, as you shared that wonderful story, and breaking barriers was a big part of Nelson Mandela's life. Breaking through barriers. Yeah. How did that early Methodist education influence? Mandela was very much an independent thinker. How much did that early Methodist education contribute to that?
I think it developed. He had to go to school, and he was alone at school. In a sense, because remember, he had a bit of a backlog. He had to catch up.
Right.
That was his first formal schooling.
Right.
He went to university where he developed. It was quite interesting. You talked about his independent mindedness. I think it's illustrated by the fact that as a young sports person at university, he excelled in individual sports. He loved to box. He loved ballroom dancing. He loved athletics. He was a cross-country runner. It was all a test of endurance, maybe a sign of what was to come in later years. And that, I think, instilled in him the desire to excel. Remember, his dad died when he was about 8 or 9, and his guardian was the paramount chief, acting paramount chief of his tribe.
And that was the Exos. How do you say that? The tribe, was it Xhosa tribe?
If you try using it like a K, the Xhosa tribe.
Xhosa tribe. Okay.
Yes, and so this man was also a Christian, he and his wife, and part of his regime rather, was every Sunday was church day. You went to Sunday school and you went to church. And that is how Mandela grew up, being, so one say, disciplined to be someone who participated in Christian activities, and that Sunday was set aside for your God.
Yes.
And that came through in later years, that discipline that he had been taught from an early age.
You mentioned a few minutes ago that even after the historic election where he broke through the barrier, he became president of South Africa. Still, the white minority viewed Mandela, continued to view him as a terrorist, if you will. And in fact, some of them even called him the Antichrist. But Mandela himself did have to fight against apartheid, and there was violence in that fight. How did he deal with that? How did he deal with being educated as a Christian, learning the teachings of this Jesus of Nazareth, how did he reconcile the violence that certainly the movement was a part of with his belief in the teachings of Jesus?
Yeah, Nelson Mandela, as well as the late Oliver Tambo, two very pivotal figures in the leadership of the ANC. Unbelievable. They were at the same university together. Let me just stop on Tambo for a minute. Tambo led the ANC in exile, and in 1990, just after the ANC had been unbanned, he suffered a severe stroke which took him out of public life, although he returned to South Africa. But the two of them at university, Tambo wanted to become an Anglican priest. The two of them became partners as lawyers in later years, but at university, they were Sunday school teachers. Unbelievable. These two young men were Sunday school teachers, and later they would lead the liberation movement, or one of the liberation movements in South Africa, the ANC. But what persuaded him? I think he had reached a stage, at that stage, when he chose another means of opposing the apartheid government. The leader of the ANC was Chief Albert Luthuli, Africa and South Africa's first Nobel Peace Prize laureate and a man of peace, another committed Christian, whose biography, the title is Let My People Go. Luthuli did not believe in violence, but Mandela had reached a stage where he said they had mounted several campaigns, including a defiance campaign. They had been talking to the government of the time, and they were not being taken seriously. And in a sense, they were also losing credibility among the people they said they wanted to lead into freedom, because it was quite clear they were just doing all the talking, but no reaction. In the end, I think they were forced into that avenue of pursuing armed struggle against the South African government, because if change were to come, looking at it from their side, it had to come through something different than protest action. And I think the fact that he went for military training in Algeria, and because of that military training he was subsequently jailed for 5 years, that shows how serious he was about freedom and about then following the traditional route, I'm using the word advisedly, of his forebears in taking up arms as a last resort.
When we come back, we've got to take a break here. When we come back, there's another South African that so many of us know, a religious leader, Bishop Desmond Tutu, and we know of the tension. Some of us know of the tension between Bishop Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela. Let's talk about that when we come back. Can we do that, Dennis?
Indeed.
The spiritual Mandela, faith and religion in the life of Nelson Mandela on his 100th anniversary of his birth, his birthday week. We'll be back. More strategies to come.
When your child or grandchild is in trouble, you'll do almost anything to help, won't you? But who do you turn to? Where? Let me tell you about Milestones Counseling Center in Broad.
Welcome back. Welcome back into Strategies for Living. Marriage and family therapist David McMillan, PLPC, Carla McCormick with Dennis Corwagan. He is the author of The Spiritual Mandela, Faith and Religion in the Life of this wonderful man. We're marking the 100th anniversary of his birth, and you'll find this book, The Spiritual Mandela, at your favorite bookseller, out from Imagine Publishing. It'll come out later this week. Bishop Desmond Tutu, another South African giant and spiritual leader, Anglican bishop, of course, obviously devout Christian himself. But to describe the relationship between these two, as I read a bit, Dennis, in your book, I thought about it's complicated. It's very complicated, isn't it?
Very complicated to have two forceful personalities in the way in which they were, and were not known to mind the P's and Q's at times as friends, and see them as friends. Remember that Tutu, in the time when Mandela was in prison, virtually became, with Alan Busak, the spiritual leaders of the liberation struggle inside South Africa, and he spoke truth to power when there was a different government, and when there was a democratically elected government, he did not quietly disappear by riding off into the sun. He remained, albeit not on the political front, but as a spiritual leader, and they remained friends, great friends. But their friendship was the one where sometimes they spoke the truth, and the truth that was spoken at the time sometimes hurt and went
tension.
deeper because it came from a friend. Let's take the case of the ANC. When there was, shortly after the ANC had come to power, there was a recommendation that ministers of Mandela's cabinet and other politicians should get a big increase. Now, bear in mind, this was the same ANC that had criticized the previous government for the exorbitant salaries paid to politicians.
Right.
And here, they were increasing those salaries.
Right.
And Tutu said that the ANC had criticized the gravy train, but now that they were in power, they had stopped it, only to get on board that particular gravy train themselves. Mandela just lost it, you know. He totally lost it.
Now, Tutu chose to debate this in the press. Basically, he basically
absolutely
yeah.
He made a national issue of it, and he was not used to that type of thing. In the ANC, it was the quiet thing. If you were dissatisfied, you brought it to the party's attention. But this little bishop, Mandela was not the president of his organization. He was answerable to God and God only. And he spoke the truth as he saw it. So there was this huge, ugly spat between them. And Tutu, after being criticized, said he found it very distressing that his president should be behaving like an ordinary politician by not answering the point that he had brought up, and instead criticizing him. The two of them subsequently made up. Tutu's assistant at the time, a wonderful journalist, John Allen, told me that they got a call from the president of South Africa. We joked about it to Tutu, but Tutu had made his point, and his point was, you might have been elected to lead this country, but you're not above criticism. And I dare say that is a lesson for all politicians, I think. Don't become so engrossed in your own self-importance that you think you are beyond criticism, and that even the church and church leaders should bow down to you and acknowledge that you're the king. I think that incident is what Tutu brought out there, that Mandela is not a king. He is a democratically elected servant of the people of South Africa.
Right.
And as I said, they remained friends. Once when Tutu had the birthday party, Mandela rocked up there as invited, and Tutu said to him, please don't disturb my party. You're not the main guest here. I am the guest. It's my birthday party. And that was the jocular type of friendship they had. They had. Usually when Mandela was president, they had breakfast together. When Mandela's second marriage to Winnie Mandela broke down, Tutu was one of the people he turned to for counseling and guidance. So it was a give and take type of friendship, I would say, and by two men who respected one another.
So, Dennis, what did you learn that you didn't already know from Mandela's grandson, Mandela?
Yes, Mandela. Yes.
So,
from his grandson Mandela.
Yes.
Yes. Carla, that the young boy. Remember where we started off about Mandela's traditional roots and how he was raised in a particular tradition in South Africa. The young boy, Mandela had told the young boy's mother when he was at school in South Africa, and those were during the turbulent times, to put him in a private school in a neighboring country because he was the only one who could carry forward the Mandela name in a traditional manner. There was quite a loaded statement he had made, and he had then, when his father had been stripped, Mandela's father that is, of his title as a chief because he refused to obey instruction given to him by a white magistrate. And more than 50, 80 years later, the chieftainship was restored to the Mandela family, and Mandela passed it on to Mandela. And there, on the day of the 5th of December 2013, when Mandela passed away, on that day, Mandela told this sad, poignant piece. Let's just stop here for a minute. Mandela used to tease his granddad. He said, when in South Africa we have, I suppose you have the same in the US, census enumerators coming along and during a time of census, and he said he always, when they came along, they would ask his grandfather everything, and then church denomination, and he would say Methodist. And as Mandela said, when those people left and Mandela closed the door behind them, he would say, now don't forget, Methodist. I am a Methodist. Put it down as a Methodist. Another thing that Mandela shared with me was that he had been raised by another set of grandparents, his mother's folk as well, and they were Jehovah's Witnesses. So he said when he lived with his grandfather, he started going to a Catholic church. And one day his grandfather sat him down and said, where have you been? And he said, I've been to church. And his grandfather said, which church? And he said, the Catholic church. And he said, now remember, you can go to church, but the Mandelas are Methodist. You go to the Methodist church. And the boy went to the Methodist church as a young teenager. But it was his duty. Sometimes these duties fall upon one without one wishing to really carry them out. But he said on that particular day, his father had been very sick. There were reports that every once in a while Mandela had died. Mandela was at death's door. But on this day, he just felt he had to go from the Eastern Cape to Johannesburg. And he had to see his grandfather. He felt it was time. And there he went, and he said he went into the room where Mandela was lying unconscious, and his wife, Graça Marcel, was there with him. And he took his hand, and he said it was time to go. He was there to release him.
Wow.
He said it was time to go.
It's time.
He thanked Mandela's mother and the husband for the son that they had brought into this world, and also for the time that they gave to him to be a leader in this country, and for the way in which they had raised him. And he was now returning him, their son, to them in a spiritual sense.
Wow.
And he said Mandela grabbed his hand And then afterwards, he said he felt at peace. He could leave the family home, the Mandela home. And later he got a call saying it's going to be very, very soon. But he said he himself was at peace because he did what he had come to do.
He'd released.
And Grossom herself subsequently told him it seemed to her that Mandela had waited for his grandson and his heir to say goodbye and then move on out of this life.
The spiritual Mandela, faith and religion in the life of this wonderful man, Nelson Mandela. I love this quote by Mandela. I'm not a saint unless you think of a saint as a sinner who keeps on trying.
Absolutely.
We'll be back with Dennis Kerwagan, the author of The Spiritual Mandela, in just a moment. Stay with us. You know, there are a lot of places that you can buy insurance, but there's only one, Jerry Anderson State Farm. Now, Jerry's here to help us manage the risk of everyday life, recover from the unexpected, and manage dreams. Jerry Anderson is at 4324 Parkway Drive in Bossier City. Auto insurance, home insurance, property, business insurance, life insurance. Call Jerry Anderson, 746-1209, or you can go to jerryanderson.com. I think you'll see doing business with Jerry makes a difference. Jerry is your neighbor. 746-1209, 4324 Parkway Drive in Bossier City. No matter where you are in life, Jerry Anderson, State Farm, is here to help. 4324 Parkway Drive in Bossier City, 746-1209, or jerryanderson.com. There's a lot of places to buy insurance, but there's only one, Jerry Anderson State Farm.
How many folks do you know, maybe you're one of them, who would love to be out of the house you're in, but you hesitate, you don't move because it's just too much trouble? Well, you know, there is an easier way. Don't waste time or energy. Let Chris Hayes and the Chris Hayes team take care of you. They offer the no-risk home selling guarantee. Chris promises if you're not happy, you can get out of the deal and cancel the listing. Call today. Get details 207-7653 or look online at the perfectly titled NoRiskHomeselling.com. And when you do, enter coupon code KEEL. You'll get a free home warranty certificate worth $600. Keller Williams Realty, NWLA. Each office independently owned and operated. 318-213-1555. Licensed by Louisiana Real Estate Commission. Terms and conditions apply. Call for details.
Addiction takes a toll on your body, mind. is in the house. And welcome back. Welcome back into 101.7 FM and 710 KEEL. Welcome back into Strategies for Living. Marriage and family therapist David McMillan, PLPC Carla McCormick, and Dennis Kerwagan, the author of The Spiritual Mandela, is our life strategist this evening. Dennis, we've only got a couple of minutes left. I know you were a former parliamentary spokesman for ANC, and I want to ask you, forgiveness and respect for our common humanity, should that be a bigger part of politics than it is all over the world?
David, yes. I often suspect during election time and watch people from different political parties trading insults, belittling others, and then after the election, they want to say, come on now, let's make up, the battle is over. But it's not as easy as that. When I, as an ordinary voter, see what I perceive to be unforgiveness in a politician that I follow, and that politician pours scorn and contempt on his opponents, I am being influenced in a way, and that pushes people into different camps, I think, and that stirs up tension, even within citizens living in one particular neighborhood.
Right.
And I think politicians really, in my view, should tone it down.
Yeah.
I think politicians contribute to a lot of tension between different actors in different communities.
Maybe
and
we
then
need
afterwards they want to.
maybe we need to give them all a copy of the Spiritual Mandela.
Maybe they could learn from that.
Maybe they
know?
could. Dennis,
Don't-
thank you so much for this wonderful book. Folks, you got to go get the Spiritual Mandela out at your favorite bookseller later this week from Imagine Publishing. Dennis, thank you for being a great life strategist
Thank you so
here
much,
on
David,
Strategies
and
for
thank
Living.
you, caller.
Oh, thank you.
Folks, thank you for tuning in. We've been presented by CADA, by Jerry Anderson State Farm Insurance, by Learning RX, by Highland Place Rehab and Nursing, by Jacob's Well Inspirational Books and Gifts, and by Resilient House. If today were the last day of your life, you only had one more phone call that you could make, who would you call? What would you say? And why are you waiting? Make the call. For PLPC Carla McCormick, for Reuben Wright, and for Dennis Kerwagan, I'm marriage and family therapist David McMillan, and we'll see you next time here on Strategies for Living.
Breaking news and trending talk. This is 101.7 FM and 710 KEEL. KEEL, Shreveport.